Jeremy Renner was taking a quick break at a McDonald's in Los Angeles when a 5-year-old boy approached him with a broken toy car in his hand and whispered something in his ear. Jeremy's expression suddenly turned serious. He stood up and called 911. What happened next was heartbreaking. Before we get into the story, if you enjoy real-life stories like this, let us know which platform you're watching us on in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe. There's another heartwarming story coming tomorrow. That day, it was a sunny afternoon in Los Angeles. The sky was a clear blue, and the clouds were moving slowly across the sky. Jeremy Renner was an actor known for his kindness and determination. That day, he had just come from a volunteer event supporting underprivileged children. He had spent hours giving his all to help the children. He was tired but at peace. Instead of going home or stopping by a fancy restaurant, he decided to pull over at the McDonald's he passed by on his way. Why not, he thought. He had missed the simple pleasure of enjoying a quiet moment away from prying eyes. As he walked in, the classic McDonald's atmosphere greeted him. The sounds of children, order announcements, and the scent of fries and meat filled the air. There was a warmth in the place. Families had dispersed, and children were playing joyfully in the play area. Jeremy, dressed in his black t-shirt and glasses, blended in unnoticed as he joined the line. This simple choice of clothing reflected Jeremy's relaxed yet cautious demeanor. He quickly ordered a menu from the counter and sat down at an empty table in the corner. He silenced his phone and turned the screen away. This short break, where he could clear his mind, was a rare moment of silence in the midst of the day's hustle and bustle. Just as he was about to start eating, something caught his attention. A small child sitting at a nearby table was staring at him intently. The child had blonde, messy hair. He was wearing a worn, faded blue shirt. He was clutching a broken toy car tightly in his arms. He wouldn't let go, as if this small object was his last source of security in the world. The child seemed uncertain. There was something in his eyes, curiosity, anxiety, and an unexplainable worry. Jeremy smiled slightly at first, but continued eating. However, after a few seconds, he noticed that the child was still looking at him. It was as if he wanted to say something, but couldn't muster the courage. The man sitting at the same table with him was striking. His suit was immaculate. Even his posture was measured. He was looking at his phone with a serious, almost expressionless face. He looked like someone who wanted to keep everything under control. As the child moved, he glanced at him with a stern look, as if trying to control even his breathing. Jeremy immediately sensed the tension between them. The strange imbalance between the two did not escape his notice. The child was timid, the man dominant. Authority and fear seemed to have gathered at the same table. And at that very moment, the child gathered his courage and surprisingly got up from his seat. The child stepped down from his chair with shy but determined steps. He pressed his broken toy car to his chest and walked forward without taking his eyes off Jeremy. It was as if the entire restaurant had slowed down. Sounds became muffled, moments stretched out. When Jeremy noticed the child approaching, he slowly placed his hamburger on the table. When the child stood next to him, he turned completely toward him. His little face was filled with complex emotions. There was a clear mixture in his eyes: fear, anxiety, and a glimmer of hope that seemed like a cry for help. His tiny body was trembling. He leaned forward as if to say something, but his voice was so soft that Jeremy had to lean closer to hear him. The child's whispered words startled him. Just as he was about to respond, the child suddenly stopped. The man at the table had noticed the child had disappeared. He looked up, his eyes fixed on Jeremy. There was something in that gaze, an unfamiliar threat. Jeremy didn't break eye contact. The man slowly stood up, straightened his jacket, and approached them with measured steps. Jeremy looked calm, but his expression had changed. He sensed that this chance encounter was about to turn into something serious. With growing awareness, he assessed the situation. This child didn't just seem lost. He was asking for help. The restaurant was filled with noise, laughter echoing through the air. But Jeremy was now in a different reality. He focused all his attention on the child. This little boy, whose name he didn't know, stood beside him with suppressed fear. He was clutching his broken toy car so tightly that it seemed as if it would fall apart if he let go. He looked at the table where the man had been sitting. Jeremy realized who the man was: Mr. Harris. The man was still holding his phone, but his attention was entirely on them. His gaze was sharp, his movements measured. The man's gaze was cold and domineering, weighing down on the child like a threat. Ethan quickly looked away, as if he knew what was about to happen. Jeremy slowly crouched down to the child's level. His voice was calm but clear. "Ethan, don't be afraid. You can tell me what happened." The child hesitated. He crumpled the hem of his shirt with his left hand. His eyes darted around, checking to see if anyone had heard them. Then he whispered in a voice so soft it was almost inaudible, "I can't talk here." Jeremy took a deep breath. Those words were enough. Ethan was truly afraid. And there was something serious enough to warrant asking a stranger for help. Jeremy nodded to reassure him. "It's okay. You're safe now, I promise." Just then, Harris stood up from the chair. He carefully straightened his jacket, as if he were about to take the stage. His steps were deliberate, but there was a faint unease on his face. Jeremy slowly got to his feet and stood in front of Ethan. Harris approached and spoke with a forced smile. "Ethan can be a bit nosy sometimes. I hope he didn't bother you." Jeremy didn't take his eyes off him. Something was off about this man. His experience and instincts were warning him. Without breaking eye contact, he replied with a brief smile, "No, he just showed me his car. I think it's broken. He obviously values it a lot." Harris narrowed his eyes slightly but kept his expression neutral. "Yes, he's very attached to it." He then reached out his hand toward Ethan. "Come on, Ethan, it's time to go." But Ethan stepped back and hid behind Jeremy. He didn't speak, but that small gesture said it all. The smile faded from Harris's face and he took a short breath. "Time is running out. You've kept him long enough. Excuse me." As the man moved to pull Ethan away, Jeremy quickly but gently touched his shoulder. "We can wait a moment. Ethan seems to need some time. He wanted to tell me something about his car." "Maybe we should deal with him first," Jeremy said firmly. Just then a waiter, sensing the tension in the air, approached with a tray. "Everything okay?" he asked. His eyes lingered on Harris for a moment. Jeremy responded with a brief smile. "No problem, just a little chat, but I think Ethan could use a drink." The waiter nodded, but his eyes remained suspicious on Harris. He then quietly walked away. As soon as he was out of sight, Jeremy quickly pulled his phone out of his pocket, carefully checked the screen, and sent a short message to the emergency number. It was time to act. Harris noticed. He approached. His voice was a little harsher. "I don't know what you're doing, but this is taking too long." He was trying not to lose control, but the tension in his eyes was obvious. Jeremy spoke with a calm expression on his face. "I'm just trying to help a child who needs to talk to someone. You look like a parent. You should understand." Ethan was still clutching his small toy car tightly. His body was tense, but finally, in a low voice, almost a whisper, he said, "I don't want to go. Can I stay here, please?" These words left Harris momentarily speechless. Then his expression darkened. He turned to Jeremy, his voice cold. "My advice to you is to mind your own business." Jeremy didn't move. He knew this was much deeper than it appeared on the surface. Ethan was scared, and this wasn't just a child's tantrum. Jeremy had to be careful, but leaving this child alone wasn't an option. He pressed send on his phone. The message had already been sent. Help was on the way. Harris looked into Jeremy's eyes. The silence between them was harder than words. Neither of them moved, sizing each other up. Jeremy felt time running out. A voice inside him told him it wasn't over yet. The laughter, conversations, and sounds of orders in the restaurant played in the background, but the air felt heavy to him. Standing between Ethan and Harris, he felt a kind of pressure. The little boy was still clutching the broken car. It was as if the toy was a shield against the outside world. His anxious eyes were fixed on Jeremy. Jeremy knelt down again, his voice low but calm. "Ethan, can you tell me what happened?" Ethan turned his head. His eyes scanned the room, trying to see if Harris was still watching them. The man hadn't gotten up from his table, but his gaze was hard. He hadn't put down his phone, watching them with a fixed, threatening expression. Ethan clung tighter to his car. Then he leaned closer to Jeremy, his voice trembling. "He did something bad to my mom. Can you help me?" The muscles in Jeremy's face froze for a moment. That voice, he recognized it. Despair, fear, and a silent plea for help. In that moment, he focused all his attention on the child's safety. He looked into his eyes. "I promise you I'll help," Jeremy said, his voice calm but firm with determination. Ethan nodded slowly, but the fear in his eyes was still there. He thought Harris had noticed, and he was right. Harris suddenly stood up. He straightened his jacket. There was anger in his eyes that he tried to suppress with a forced smile. He walked forward slowly. "Sorry to interrupt. We were just about to leave. Thanks for entertaining Ethan," he said. He reached out his hand, but Jeremy stopped him before he could touch the child. He stood up and stepped in front of the Harris. His body language was relaxed, but his eyes said something else. Harris hesitated for a moment and took a step back. Jeremy spoke in a calm tone. "He seems like he wants to talk about his car. I think he'll want to stay a few more minutes." Harris's face hardened. He narrowed his eyes in response. "You're very kind, but he's with me. We have an appointment." Jeremy didn't move. He stood still, looking at Harris, maintaining his position without breaking his stance. His voice was clear. "The kids need time to talk. I'm sure you understand." Harris's face tensed for a moment, as if his patience was wearing thin, but he quickly regained his composure. "Of course, but we don't have much time," he said. Then he turned his gaze to Ethan, who was hiding behind Jeremy. "Come on, Ethan, it's time to go." As he reached out his hand, the waiter reappeared. Holding his notepad, he approached and placed a folded piece of paper on Jeremy's table. It looked like a napkin, but it was different. Jeremy quickly picked it up and glanced at it. The police are on their way. He took a deep breath, but it wasn't over yet. The danger was still ahead of him. He turned to Ethan and gave him a reassuring smile, then turned back to Harris. "Why don't we sit down and relax for a while? Sometimes kids just need to breathe." His voice was steady and soft. Harris gave Jeremy a cold look, but it was clear he was struggling inside. He shook his head reluctantly and turned back to the table. However, Jeremy didn't see this as a retreat. Harris's eyes were fixed on the two of them, unblinking. He looked like he was about to explode at any moment. At the same time, he was leaning over his phone, speaking quietly. His anxiety was evident in his body language. Jeremy realized that time was moving quickly and that the moment of decision was approaching. He had to protect Ethan and uncover the truth behind this. Harris ended the call, then stood up once more. He straightened his jacket, and this time there was a different kind of harshness on his face. A threatening darkness glinted in his eyes. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into," he muttered. Jeremy didn't respond, but he was alert. Every movement could have a meaning. Harris measured his steps and slowly made his way toward the door. Jeremy kept his eyes on him. If something sudden happened, he would have to intervene immediately. His entire body was on edge. Ethan stood next to Jeremy, pressing the broken toy car to his chest. His little feet were planted firmly on the ground, his eyes fixed on the floor. The din of the restaurant pierced the silence between them. Harris stood by the entrance, adjusting his jacket. But Jeremy noticed that the movement was unnatural. It wasn't a casual adjustment. He was scanning the area. He was probably calculating his next move. He reached into his jacket pocket, took out his phone, and quickly typed something. Then he turned back to the table. Just then, a cautious waiter approached Jeremy and whispered, "The police are on their way." Jeremy didn't take his eyes off Harris, just shook his head slightly. The man sat down at the table, but he was now a different person. His body was tense and his hand kept going to his phone. Jeremy knew this was a clear sign that Harris had lost control. Either he was scared or he wanted to turn the situation to his advantage before the police arrived. Every move he made was deliberate. His words were chosen carefully, his posture calculated. When he saw that Jeremy was still watching him closely, he broke the silence. "You seem very focused on our conversation, Mr. Renner." Jeremy didn't break his expression. Ethan's eyes were still filled with fear. "I'm just trying to understand why you laugh so dryly and strangely," Jeremy said. "Children have vivid imaginations, yes, but sometimes that imagination is a signal within reality. It's not hard to understand." Harris responded with a dismissive expression, curling his lips. "Someone like you would know that. Acting, stories. You deal with fiction all the time. Maybe Ethan is just telling a story." Jeremy folded his arms. Without looking at the boy, he said, "Maybe, but children are more honest than adults. They don't hide their feelings. Even if they don't know how to express them, they feel them." Harris leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Then let's ask him. Ethan, what do you want? What do you want? Do you want to go or stay here and chat with this gentleman?" Ethan looked up, hesitating. He glanced at Jeremy, then at Harris. Ethan's hand trembled. He clutched the toy car tighter, as if gathering his courage from it. Finally, in a barely audible voice, he said, "I want to stay here." That sentence made Harris clench his jaw. His fists tightened for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. His smile was more forced now. "All right," he said, his voice level, "but I hope it won't be too long." When he turned back to the table, the waiter had returned. He was holding a glass and a small piece of paper tucked underneath it. He placed it silently in front of Jeremy. Jeremy picked up the paper and looked at it carefully. There was only one sentence on it. "We'll be there in 2 minutes." Wait! Jeremy knew he had to buy some time. He turned to Ethan and carefully steered the conversation. "Ethan, you said something bad happened to your mom. Do you know where she is right now?" Ethan started to answer, but Harris suddenly slammed his palm on the table. The sound was loud and sudden. All attention turned to the table. "Enough," he said. "This is none of your business." Jeremy turned to him. His voice was still calm, but his words were heavy. "If a child says his mother has been hurt, it's everyone's business, especially mine." Harris leaned forward again. He locked his eyes on Jeremy's. "I suggest you keep quiet now." Jeremy met his gaze with determination for a moment. Then he stood up and motioned to Ethan to stay by his side. His voice was steady and clear. "If you want to talk about this, we can talk about it civilly, or you can wait here quietly until the police arrive." Harris was taken aback by these words. He froze for a moment. His eyes darted around. He realized that he had lost control of the situation. At that moment, 2 police cars pulled up outside the restaurant. The doors opened. 2 officers entered with obvious determination. Harris immediately jumped to his feet, straightening his suit. He leaned toward Jeremy and muttered through clenched teeth, "You made a big mistake." Then he took a step toward the door. Jeremy reflexively stepped in front of Ethan. It was time to act. Jeremy knew Harris couldn't get away. He kept his eyes fixed on him, and when the doors opened, 2 uniformed police officers entered. Their steps were determined, their eyes scanning the tense atmosphere. They looked at the table where Jeremy, Ethan, and Harris were sitting. They immediately noticed the gloom in the air. The waiter bowed his head with obvious nervousness and silently pointed in their direction. Jeremy kept his face calm, but he could feel Ethan's grip tighten on his arm. The child's small body was still trembling. Jeremy knelt down, lowering himself to the child's eye level, and whispered, "You're safe now. Help is here." Harris stood tall. He straightened his jacket. His demeanor was arrogant and defiant. His eyes were fixed on the police officers. It was as if this were a stage for him. The names of the arriving officers were visible on their badges, Ramirez and Vega. Both looked serious and prepared. They approached slowly. Ramirez spoke first. "We received a complaint. Someone said there was a problem. Is everything okay?" Harris smiled as if reciting a memorized script. "Everything's fine, officer. Just a little misunderstanding. We're having dinner with my son." Before the police could respond, Jeremy stood up. He took a step forward, shielding Ethan behind him. "Officers, you need to hear what this boy has to say," he said. Ramirez immediately paid attention. Vega bent down slightly, lowering himself to the child's level. His voice was soft. "Hello, sweetheart. My name is Vega. What's your name?" Ethan didn't answer. His eyes darted to Jeremy. Jeremy shook his head and gently pressed his shoulder to encourage him. Ethan whispered in a trembling voice, "Ethan." Vega nodded. "Okay, Ethan, it's okay. Can you tell us what happened?" Ethan's gaze slowly shifted from Vega to Harris. Harris's face suddenly tensed. He hardened. "Don't say anything, Ethan. We're leaving now." His voice was sharp. Ramirez immediately stepped forward, blocking Harris. "Please stay where you are. No one is going anywhere until we figure out what's going on." The presence of the police gave Ethan courage. After a few seconds of silence, he raised his head. His voice was soft but clear. He hurt my mom, and he said no one could help us." All the noise in the restaurant suddenly stopped. Ramirez and Vega exchanged a brief glance. Jeremy crouched down next to Ethan again. His voice was soft but carried deep meaning. "You did the right thing, Ethan," he said, looking at him with an encouraging smile. Harris's face tensed. His patience had run out. "This is nonsense," he exploded. "He's just a kid. He's making it up. My lawyer is going to love this," he said, trying to push his way through the police officers. Ramirez quickly placed his hand on Harris's chest to stop him. "We need to clear this up Sir, stay where you are. Vega turned to Ethan. Ethan, do you know where your mother is right now? Is she at home? Ethan shook his head slightly, but the worry on his face was evident. She can't get up. No one will believe me, he said. Jeremy gently touched the boy's shoulder once more. We believe you. You're not alone anymore. Everything will be okay. Harris scowled and forced a laugh. Really? You're going to trust a child's word? You're going to ignore a responsible adult? I can't allow this nonsense. Ramirez's voice was calm, but there was a clear warning in his tone. We have sufficient reason to investigate the situation. You need to come with us. Harris took a step back, looking around with angry eyes. You don't know who you're dealing with. As he tried to walk away, Vega quickly reached out and grabbed his arm. Ramirez immediately stepped in and held the man in place. As Vega removed the handcuffs, he asked firmly, Are you resisting arrest? Harris continued to struggle, but the handcuffs were fastened around his wrists. Jeremy stood right next to Ethan, shielding him with his body. Ethan was slightly relieved, but there was still a look of vulnerability on his face. As Harris was being led away by the police, he growled through clenched teeth, You're lying. Jeremy turned to Ethan. His voice was soft. Can you show me where your mother is? We can go with the police. Ethan was still holding the broken toy car in one hand. With his other hand, he reached out to Jeremy's hand and slowly shook his head. Jeremy felt a lump in his throat. He had to suppress his emotions, but Ethan's eyes and touch had shaken him deeply. Now was the time to act. Turning to the police officers, he spoke in a determined tone. Take him home. There's still a lot to do. The restaurant was quiet, but the tension still hung in the air. Customers watched silently, some whispering about Harris being handcuffed and led away. Jeremy didn't leave Ethan's side. He continued to shield him. Ethan was still holding the broken toy car tightly. His little hands were still shaking. Jeremy crouched down again. His voice was reassuring. We'll get through this together, okay? The police are here. You're safe now. There was a brief silence. Then Jeremy asked slowly, Would you like to tell me a little about your mom? Ethan looked up. His eyes were filled with tears. His lips trembled. He paused for a moment, then spoke in a quiet voice. I yelled at her. Then she fell to the ground. She said she was okay, but she wasn't. I know. Jeremy's throat tightened. The child's words were simple, but the weight they carried was devastating. He knew they couldn't waste any time. He stood up, followed Harris out the door, and turned his attention to the officers. He's afraid to go home. He's worried about his mom, he told Ramirez. Ramirez nodded, took out his notebook, and wrote something down. Vega knelt down next to Ethan and spoke to him. His voice was soft and inviting. Ethan, can you take us to your house? We want to make sure your mother is okay. Ethan hesitated at first. Then he turned to Jeremy, his eyes searching for reassurance. Jeremy nodded. Ethan slowly nodded in agreement. I can show you, but the door's always locked. I don't know how to get inside. Jeremy placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. Don't worry, he said reassuringly. We'll find a way. As the police made preparations, a restaurant employee ran over to Vega. The man left a small bag on the table, he said. I think he forgot it in his hurry. The restaurant employee brought the small black backpack and placed it on the table where Jeremy and Ethan were sitting. Jeremy examined the bag carefully. At that moment, Harris's shout was heard from outside. You're making a mistake. You have nothing. I'm innocent. Do you understand? Innocent. Ramirez ignored the outburst. He quietly closed the car door. Vega directed Jeremy and Ethan to the other patrol car. Jeremy sat in the back seat and took Ethan with him. The little boy's body was still trembling with fear. Jeremy began to distract him with a soft voice, telling him something to take his mind off things. You know, fixing toy cars is actually much easier than you think. Ethan looked away at first, but after a few seconds, a faint smile appeared on his lips. Do you think my mom will be okay? He asked in a low voice. Jeremy turned to him. He looked into his eyes and replied with a clear expression. We'll do everything we can. I promise. As the patrol car approached Ethan's house, the atmosphere inside grew heavy. The silence of the street foreshadowed the approaching danger. The windows were dark. Vega noticed that the front door was slightly ajar and quickly whispered to Ramirez, Stop. The vehicle came to a halt. Vega immediately turned to Jeremy and Ethan. "Stay in the car," he said. Then, drawing their weapons, Vega and Ramirez cautiously stepped outside. Jeremy turned to Ethan and bowed his head respectfully. "Stay with me. We won't let anything get to you," he said. He took the boy's hand. The police approached the house cautiously. The silence was as threatening as a scream. Ramirez slowly pushed the door open. The creaking door revealed the chaos inside. An overturned table, broken glass, and scattered belongings littered the floor. The police slipped inside. In the corner of the living room, a woman sat motionless on a chair. Sarah, Ethan's mother, was unconscious, sitting with a bloody gash on her head. She was breathing, but her condition looked serious. Emergency medical services were called. Vega went into one room, Ramirez to the other. Jeremy entered and scanned the room. Then one of the police officers handed him the notebook they had found in Harris's bag. Jeremy carefully turned the pages. The notes were terrifying. Harris had been following Sarah and Ethan, noting down their every move. Worst of all, he had detailed his plan to take Ethan to another state. Everything was right there, in black and white. The horrific notes in the notebook clearly revealed the extent of Harris' crimes. As the police handcuffed him and put him in the car, he continued to scan the area with a dark expression, muttering threats. But no one was paying attention to him anymore. Everyone's focus had shifted to Sarah and Ethan. Jeremy was right beside the little boy. Ethan asked fearfully, "Will you stay with me?" Jeremy answered without hesitation, "I'll be here until everything is okay." With the first light of day, a peaceful glow filtered through the hospital windows. Sarah was fast asleep, hooked up to monitors. Her face was pale, but she was safe now. Ethan sat at her bedside, holding her hand. Jeremy stood a step back, watching over them both. After hours of waiting, the doctor entered the room and spoke with a smile. "Her condition is stable. She'll make a full recovery with rest." Ethan took a deep breath. He then looked at Jeremy with a shy smile. He whispered quietly, "Thank you." Days later, Sarah was discharged from the hospital. She was still fragile, but she was now a mother who knew she was no longer alone. As she left, she turned to Jeremy with tears in her eyes. "You saved our lives. I don't know how to thank you." Jeremy responded with a sincere smile. "I was just there at the right time. The real hero is Ethan. He had the courage to ask for help." Ethan showed Jeremy the repaired broken toy car. Jeremy had fixed it. This small piece reminded them that there were still things worth fixing after all they had been through. This experience had deeply affected Jeremy. He later got in touch with a local charity and began supporting child protection projects. He didn't lose touch with Sarah and Ethan. He didn't leave them alone as they started their new life. Months later, Jeremy was invited to a ceremony organized by the local police department. Ethan received the Young Hero Award for his courage in asking for help. At the ceremony, Ethan gave Jeremy a drawing he had made. It showed a child and a man holding hands. In colorful letters, it read, "You're my hero." Jeremy smiled, his eyes filled with tears. He leaned toward Ethan and whispered, "You're the real hero. Asking for help is the greatest courage." If you like this story, stay with us for more, because hope, kindness, and courage never run out in this world.